Well, hello again. I just thought I'd do a follow-up to the previous video concerning a young reader's first three books, where I listed the first three books that I had read between the ages of 12 and 13. Mentioned also that, in the comments section, we could get something going as in, tell me, tell others about some of the first reads you completed, novels, etc. But the reason I'm doing a follow-up to this is because I realized something about my intro there. I had mentioned Arthur Lipsite's The Contender and the character Arthur, but the character's name was not Arthur, of course. As we know, it was Albert. So you could call it, instead of a typo, a tungo. I don't know. Something. Wanted to get that straight. But there was something else. There was another reason. I mentioned during the time the Outsiders movie coming out and applying to a place in Vancouver, BC, a high school. The last year of public school being, or sorry, the last year of school being grade 6 before starting in high school at grade 7 as opposed to grade 8 in Ontario. Anyway, Vancouver Tech. A lot of people might not even know about this school, let alone find it. The actual building, I imagine it's still there. But the thing is, shortly after moving from there in 83, moving away from there, something happened. That building, a lot of people are more familiar with that school and that building than they may know. If anyone out there is from the same generation or simply familiar with old TV sitcoms, that building, that school, went on to begin a career for a young actor known as Johnny Depp in the series called 21 Jump Street. That was 21 Jump Street. That's the same address. It's the same school. I had applied there for to Vancouver Tech, but we moved, and I ended up when going another year, grade 7 in Ontario before I would enter into high school in grade 8. But anyway, yeah, I just wanted to mention that. That is the same building. That building you see is was formerly known as Vancouver Tech High School, a vocational school for the trades. And I also mentioned that back then, when considering what high school we wanted to go to, I didn't even really understand the differences between a technical vocational school and your regular high school, let alone a private school, whatever. But I was trying to explain that one of the reasons all of us, me and my buddies, we were all going to head there was because of the teenagers who were, 15 and up, 15 to 18, that we were looking up to as the tough guy, cool guys, that we were aspiring to be the best fighters and all the ones that would get into the most trouble and stuff. Just dumb. But anyway, we were choosing that not because we necessarily wanted to work with our hands. I mean, both myself and one of my buddies actually three of us, me, RK, I'm just going to give initials, and LS, we were all sketching and drawing, and we kind of like that, and that's the only thing that we seem to be interested in. Of course, the music and the new awareness of the opposite sex and all that, but we and other things, but we were making that choice towards that high school because of those, I don't know, I wouldn't call them role models, hell no, but we wanted to be a part of that. It's just like, you know, things that happen in certain urban areas where kids at a young age end up looking up to drug dealers. And I'm using an extreme example because they see them with their... Anyway, anyway, these were the reasons. I'm not saying there was anything wrong with that, but I'm kind of glad that it didn't take place. But there were a lot of things that almost took place that didn't take place. Things that were much more serious. You know, some of those friends didn't survive and have been gone for quite some time. That area. But anyway, I just wanted to do a follow up there and get the character in the contender, his name, correct. I gave that a peruse and I said, wait a minute, oh, I made a mistake there. Not that it matters. I mean, my videos barely get views, but I don't care. Like I said, I do these things for my own indulgence. I should be doing other things, including working on my writing projects. Anyway, that's another story altogether. The 3 books were S.E. Hinton's The Outsiders, which we got a read of from our teacher, Miss Domigan, in grade 5, at 11 years old, which I mentioned. And later on, I read that as one of my first books. Hold Fast, which was, I believe, the very first book I ever read through and completed. And Lipsight's The Contender. And I thought I'd go back and revisit some of them for the younger readers that, like I said, might have heard of them. Not quite sure how I'm going to go about it. I considered doing the S.E. Hinton read in a whispered voice, sort of like the Midnight Cowboy series that I took on. Incidentally, we just finished up the last portion of part 1 of that particular book. So just touching base on that and looking forward to it. I think I'm going to start with S.E. Hinton. I don't know. I think also, Hold Fast, whether I share it or put it up there, it might bore the tears right out of the faces of some of the people. But I'm probably going to get around to it. But I'm kind of funny about it. I think if I were to pick one out of the 3, it would be The Outsiders, of course, for a few obvious reasons that I don't have to mention. But if I'm hesitant to read the others, it's just because, people only have so much time to read, and there's so much more to read, and going back and reading books I've already read, I don't know. But might be interesting, might trigger some memories, because I can't really, recite the books themselves. We know what The Outsiders is about. Some guys who are living in Texas on the wrong side of the track, so to speak, who have gained a title of what would be called greasers, who were kind of like 10 years behind, I guess, in a way, in their attire and what they aspired towards, whatever. Kind of looked down upon by some of the upper classes that they went to school with, and this kind of thing, and that, and it's about realization of the self, and the young man, pony boy, becomes aware of, again, so it's one of those stories where he becomes aware of his connection to writing things down and his experiences, some of the things he read, and some of the awareness of being at a point in time in his development where he's aware that it's a golden time and that it doesn't last forever and blah, blah, blah. All that good stuff. Sorry. But And then you have Hold Fast, which, although I read it, I can't really recite to you too much about it, which is going to make it really interesting if I do dip into it again. What I remember is this kid living on the East Coast, actually, Newfoundland, I believe it is, and he makes references to some of his family life, what's going on, and I remember references to certain bands like Street Heart and stuff. He was, he mentioned his likes and dislikes of what kind of bands he was listening to. I don't even know. I have nothing really to say about the book, but it was just one of those things. It was read it cover to cover at the time and finished it, and there you go. Don't remember too much about it, but that's why I think it'll be interesting to reread it and go, oh, I remember this, I remember that. My as I've said before, my powers of memory are pretty good, but I can't remember everything. And then the last lip site, it basically a lower class kid struggling, finding himself in a bit of trouble in his neighborhood, where he turns that energy one day into a local boxing gym and begins to go through a bit of a transformation through struggle. He strengthens his body, learns discipline, and learns the idea that putting in effort in certain directions is kind of like what it's all about. And as a young fighter or boxer, it really wasn't, you know, how he would do as a fighter was one thing, but it's that struggle upward that would give him strength perhaps in other areas, which is epitomized by the last chapter with one of his friends that is really having some struggles with drug addiction, etc. But these books, like the Lipsite one in particular, was made for a younger audience, I believe. And the reasons, I think, are obvious. I remember offering a copy of the book up to my brother who in his teens, because I figured, like, if you were going to start reading, well, I can offer some of the books that I started with, but there was also a message behind the contender that I wanted to project towards him as he was heading into his teenage struggles and challenges, huge challenges that were just on the way. But that's another story. Worked out well for him, though, just the same, so before I go bumming people out. But yeah, so you can expect those coming up. And as for the image, again, that is from Hold Fast, and I would say that if you're looking at that image, you're basically looking at myself and my friends at the time of our adolescence and young teens. We weren't called greasers, though. We were called stoners. And they always had a word for the lower working class kids. But, we had earned that name too, though. If you were wearing lumberjackets and stuff, you were probably dipping into the beers and smoking quite a bit of pot. While the 80s were a time for, among the younger teens, as opposed to the olders, a time for kind of cleaning up. Your dress code was based on a look of professionalism. I don't know. Kids were kids and they'd do their own thing, but reputation was somehow seemed more important to them, whereas the groups of friends I was hanging with were kind of like, well, We were kind of like, F it, whatever. Um, we had a lot to learn. But yeah, that was what we looked like. Um, Later, there were names for such people. As I got older and started working, and I had gotten married, etc., etc. Um, the years that followed that, I remember some of the kids that were so predisposed to those things were later. When I say later, I say less than 10 years later, were being referred to as, like here in Ontario, they were being referred to as uh, instead, and no longer stoners but skids and these kind of things. It's just so naturally, that message that uh, the outsiders was portraying about class structure and stuff. We got it. We knew what was going on. And in fact, I remember when the movie came out back in Vancouver in 80, was it 82? As late as 82? Some of the girls that would kind of, and when we're talking about dating in those days, it was about, maybe going to the movies or holding hands or something like that. Or there was the one popular girl that all the boys would date because she was known to do things, and they would privately pass on that information to. Anyway, don't want to get seedy here, but at that time, I remember whereas that movie didn't just have an effect on some of the kids I knew and hung out with, but some of the girls too at that age that were starting to, I don't know, develop ideas about boys. They started jokingly and flirtingly started calling I don't know if they did this with my friends, but they'd see me and they'd say, "Hey, Grease, come here, I want to talk to you," and stuff like that. Like, using terms from the movie, which I guess they had seen, and, it was because, that whole thing with Sherry Valance, I believe her name was, and Ponyboy, where they're talking. They're two different classes, but they could connect, and and there was a certain sensitivity in that was being projected by the movie. They're trying to show that there's some sort of message. Well, it projected all right on some of the young girls heading into their teen years. And that was weird. That was interesting experience, and it taught me something at the time, that you can't always, of course, it's foregone conclusion, but at the time it was saying basically you can't really judge other people by your particular circumstances. You don't really know how people feel. Even if there is a social structure and there are certain rules that people seem to maintain, especially during adolescence and teen years, separations, divisions. But although it is somewhat artificial, it's still there. But at the same time, you still can share those moments where you're connecting with people you one time felt that you couldn't, or you weren't supposed to, or some stupid thing like that. But yeah, good stuff. So we'll probably start with that one, and pick up from there. But yeah, again, like, if you remember some of the first books you read, and if there's, share them in the comments. But even more so, if you can actually take some of those readings and the experiences of your life and somehow talk about some of the reading you've done where you made connections between some of the things you were learning about society, about yourself, about being a young person, growing, developing, whatever. You know where I'm going with that. If there's any connection between the two, you have a way of stitching your life together with some of the messages being taught by some of the things you read, then by all means, share. Why not? It's good stuff.